Hey, everybody. Welcome. I've got a special guest here today, and it's going to be a little different because we're going to dive into his backlog of all the amazing content he's curated as an author and why he's gone through the difficult and arduous task of doing that and bringing it all to us. Today's guest is a serial entrepreneur who has started over 30 business ventures. While not all of them took off, he discovered his passion as a mobile notary and loan signing agent, a career that not only brought him financial success, but also deep personal fulfillment. Through his work, he's been present for people on both their best and most challenging days, recognizing that true success in this field requires empathy, compassion, and a commitment to service. Understanding that knowledge without consistent implementation is practically worthless, he dedicated himself to helping others build thriving notary businesses. He's also found great success as an author, with two best-selling books that have become go-to resources in the notary industry. Sign and Thrive: How to Make Six Figures as a Mobile Notary and Loan Signing Agent provides a step-by-step guide to building a lucrative notary business, while Supercharge Your Notary Business with LinkedIn helps professionals leverage social media for growth. His books, combined with his online courses and coaching, have empowered thousands to take control of their financial futures. As the CEO of notarycoach.com, author of 6 books, and former host of the SideHustle Lounge Podcast, he has become a trusted mentor for aspiring notaries looking to create financial freedom and a meaningful career. Please join me in welcoming Bill Soroka. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Bill, you are no stranger to this show. You've been on many of the author panels that we've had over the last few months. And I asked you to come on specifically one-on-one because you're really doing well and often have more advice than all the other panelists combined on all the shows that I've had you on. And I wanted to give you the floor space to like share more of what you've been doing so we can hear and learn from your experience. But if you could just kick us off first, take a little trip in the Wayback Machine, because none of this would have happened if you hadn't gotten started with that very first book, which a lot of folks listening are still working on, that very first book. And it's hard to for a whole lots of reasons, it's hard to get that first book written. Take us back to what was the motivating factor and how did you sort of motivate yourself to move forward with that first book?
Sure. Well, the Wayback Machine, literally way back. I love talking about this. So thank you for giving me another opportunity, because writing a book absolutely changed my life in so many ways. And I love talking about it. So that way back, I had, you said it very gently in my introduction. Not all the businesses worked out. Well, they flat out failed. 26 of them were failing as I became a mobile notary, desperate to earn some money and find some purpose, something that worked. I needed a win really bad, and it started to turn for me. And as part of that, confidence started rebuilding again. I started listening to this gnawing voice inside to write a book. I knew I wanted to write a book. It was inside of me. When I was very young, I think it was age 6, I said, I want to be an author. So what happened was it started coming out more as a fear. I started worrying about dying with the story still inside me. And I wanted to get it out. I wanted to publish a book before my time here on earth was done. So I was like, what am I going to write about? I failed in business. I could talk about failure in business all day long, but I had not yet turned that corner to success. So who's going to read a book about failure with no upside, right? It was just all the bad news. So I looked at what was close to me. What am I good at? Or what could I talk about for an hour without having to take any notes? And I got clear that was probably going to be something in my current business that was starting to work at that time as a mobile notary. So I started piecing that together, but also having to overcome the demons. I'm like, who's going to read a notary book? I mean, talk about boring. So I was really working my way through that process. And honestly, it was not easy. That first book, Sign and Thrive, took me 3 years to write that early in the mornings before the phone started ringing. But it wasn't just that. It's not like this was a grand novel or anything, right? But I had those demons, one after another, that had to be conquered and then conquered again, because I'd get in my own way. I'd let those little voices come in. Who are you to write a book? Why are you even doing this? Nobody's going to read a notary business book. So I had to overcome that over and over and over again. And I fell off. Sometimes I'd fall off for months and then get back up. I just had this calling. I wanted this to be part of my legacy. I wanted to write and publish a book. So when I pulled myself together, I was finally able to do that, but it took way more time than it ever should have, conquering those demons.
I mean, the fact that you had that kind of calling from such a young age to have a book be part of your legacy kept you going. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people who initially think, I want to write a book, even if they don't always have the exact topic. Like you are searching for, like, well, what would someone want to read that I could put out there? What is the story that I can tell? And I also think you were coming from this long history of attempts that did not succeed. Which is a nice way of saying failed attempts, where, you have so many lessons learned, but who wants to learn them from you, right? So you already had that sort of mindset that you were like, well, I mean, I have something to say, but does anyone want to listen to me? And the thing about you writing for the notary community, and I feel fortunate that I not only have gotten to know you, but Laura Buer has brought me into the world of notaries as well. And you're a tight-knit group, and because you're the onlys in your world, like you're the only ones who do that and no one else understands what you do, finding each other builds community fast. And writing content for a super narrow niche like that, that's highly relevant and going to help them get further faster, is probably the smartest thing you could have done. Versus, what if you had written just a generic leadership, 10 lessons learned from failing 28 times? You know what I mean? Like, that would probably have been banal and, I don't know, like, sounded like a lot of other things already out there. It wouldn't have been unique, and it wouldn't have positioned you the way this book has. So could you speak a little bit to how you now feel about writing to such a narrow audience?
Absolutely. In retrospect, I think that was one of the best decisions that I made, is to know who I was talking to. I was one of those people who used to think, well, everybody, like even in my notary business, everybody's my customer. Everybody's going to need a notary at some point. But you don't create relationships. It's hard to target your marketing when you go too broad. So sticking with what I knew and writing to a niche audience, like one of my favorite quotes is, the riches are in the niches, bitches, because that it really is. And I'm learning this now, because my fifth book, I lose count of them. My fifth book is a general short essays about life. It's the writing I love. It comes from my heart, but it has the lowest sales, the most abysmal sales of all my books, because it's kind of that general book. But the notary books do really well, because you know exactly who you're writing to, what problem they have, how you can help them fix it. And that niching down has really helped.
What became possible because you were an author? Like, what are some early things that started to transpire that made you go, what? It was like another opportunity or another invitation came your way. What were some of those early signs that writing that book and publishing that book was going to be helpful?
I love this question. And I think the way I look at it is there's internal rewards and external rewards. The first reward, the one that was most important, was the internal one. I kept a promise to myself. that I made when I was 6 years old, right? And I'd forgotten about it through the years, but that feeling of following through and doing it, even when it sucked, even when it was hard, not knowing what the result was going to be, getting through that process, the growth that it takes to become a published author, that was probably the most rewarding place. And what that does for what it did for my confidence level, I don't even think I could put a measurement on it. It made all things possible because I believed I could.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the external stuff too, though. And this is what I think gets most of the attention, right? When you publish a book, whether you choose to agree with it or you like it or not, it's instant credibility. Even a crappy book makes you gives you instant credibility. So there was that, and that opened up doors. That was, instead of me going out to people, it was a magnet, and people started coming to me. And that opened doors to amazing relationships with collaborators, national organizations that within my industry that helped promote and sell the book, partnerships, other forms of collaboration, introductions for speaking gigs, you name it. It changed everything in my business. And without it, while we don't know, I think my life and my business would be completely different right now. I love this concept. Robbie, have we ever talked about the adjacent possible?
Oh yeah. I forget the author's name. The concept is when you open a door and discover there's a whole room, and at the other end of the room there's another door that you would never have seen if you were just standing in the hallway waiting outside the first door.
Exactly. Steve Johnson from
Thank you. The big idea, was that?
Yeah, Where Great Ideas Come From.
Thank you.
That's the name of the book. But that's all this stuff. And I consider like every failure, all 26, well, I'm up to 33 now. All 33 of those business failures was an adjacent possible. It opened up doors to a new possibility. This book and all books after that have opened up entire rooms of possibility. I've met people I would never have met. I've built courses I could have never have built without this book.
I love this idea of adjacent possible because it explains the phenomenon of the first time author's experience publishing, because when they're standing outside that first door and they're getting ready to publish, the wins that they have in their minds, the riches that they are going to earn because of this are all like based on a dream that's not based on any reality yet, because it's still a vision of what they think is behind that first door. But then it's often also a bill of goods that they've been sold about what's going to happen in their life because they write a book. Because like you said, even a crappy book is, giving people authority. So lots of people are helping authors write crappy books, which is a whole topic we can go back into. But I think only by being around other authors while you're going through this process of getting ready to publish, can you start to really see what's around the corner from you, or what is available to you when you open that door, and then the next door and the next door. Because a lot of this is like, you cannot visualize the possible successes that will come, but yet you have to persevere in actually getting the book out into the world. So you have to have enough of a reason to do it that may be built on some false hope and some false promises, because we don't actually know yet. But there is a disproportionate possibility that good things are coming your way because you went through the effort. So it's like a catch-22 where I don't want to oversell it to an author, but I'm also like, oh, but really you should finish this because, good things are coming your way.
Yes, exactly. And I when I talk to a prospective author, or what do you call that when they're dreaming to be an author? Mm-hmm. I try to have them focus on that intrinsic reason, that intrinsic feeding of the soul. Because if you know you want to write, you know it, like it's in you, and it's trying to burst out, and it probably has been since you were 6 or 4, whatever it was. You know that. So if you focus on that inside feeling of what it's going to mean to you to publish something of quality, something that delivers value to an audience, maybe it's an audience of 1, that's okay, we don't have to worry about that, but just your story, however that is going to come out. If you focus on that, all the rest is just gravy, and nobody knows what that's going to be. I didn't know Sign and Thrive was going to be the hit that it was. I just had to get it out. It was coming out. And as I've learned with great ideas too, is if you don't act on them, when they drop from the ether into your brain, they will move on to someone else. But this one stuck with me for at least 3 years to get it out. And I was committed to doing that. And it just worked out. But that whole idea is, with the adjacent possible too, is that a book, when done, I think with the right heart, the right strategies, the right support, it takes on a life of its own. So at that point, you don't have any control over it. I mean, literally, when you hit publish, and you've probably experienced this, Robbie, you think something's going this way. You're like, I built it for this, and maybe I'm going to get this. And then all of a sudden, it decides somehow that it's going to do something different, or the audience decides that it's something different, and it takes a life of its own.
Yeah, I think the best stories of that I've heard on the panels that I've facilitated for this podcast have been when people had a very particular audience in mind for their book initially, but when they hit publish and they looked at the reviews and got the feedback they were getting was from a wider audience, or maybe there was an adjacent audience that was also really keen for it. I think it helped that it had a focus when it was first being written and it wasn't generalized, but people will see in your material what they need to see. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I didn't know I could also, let's say, sell to universities. Oh, you know what I mean? Like there's some other, oh, I didn't think about how my book would be relevant to that particular audience or this sector. And my first book, Croissants versus Bagels, Strategic, Effective, and Inclusive Networking at Conferences, was written because I, at the time, wanted to be, more than anything, be a professional speaker. And I learned from my friends, the National Speakers Association, you got to have a book. And I am by no means a writer. I never thought I'd be a writer. I don't identify, even today, I'm working my 4th book. I still don't identify as a writer. But I slogged my way through the writing. And it was right before I was getting ready to hand it off to the editor that I realized that it was a good book and I wanted people to read it. Like that this is not a book I was just hitting publish. Like that suddenly that end date of publish was the beginning of everything else. And that is back in 2017. And I'm still getting booked and paid to speak based on the quality and relevance of that book, which for a minute was completely irrelevant because it was about networking at conferences. Let's all remind ourselves. But even with that blip, it's still there. And that credibility, even having a book written on that topic, helped me become a Zoom producer in the pandemic. No one said, what's your first book on? Oh, it's not on Zoom, then I don't care. You know what I mean? Like we were like, oh, you already have a book, you know? So I think that we can probably be a little more strategic than just hitting publish. I'm curious what you now think about when you decide books to write for your business, or what you might give other people advice as far as the book was being written to grow a business, not just for the calling of writing a book and saying I did it, right? You really feel like you have a message that will help people, that will attract the right people to you. What are some things you go through to decide whether to pursue the next big idea that comes to you, and the whisper in your head, like, you should write this next book now, Bill, write this next book. What do you think about this next book? So how do you make these strategic decisions?
Well, that is a deep question, because I am an idea generating machine, or my brain is anyway. I have learned to tone it down a little bit, but also I think through now the experience of the end user. And I have a stricter policy on no fluff. So when I have a no fluff policy, like there's no teasing, I'm going to deliver the value. And I have so many half-started books on my Google Drive. And I get to a point and I say, I don't have enough value here. This is a blog post, or this is going to just be an email versus an entire book, or it's going to require so much research that my non-detail oriented brain is like, nope, bye. Either you can take that idea and pass that on to the next one, because I'm not going to pursue that, right? So I really focus now on the value of the material to the audience and my ability to deliver that in a way that would make my future self proud. I'm constantly now thinking about my future self. And there's some pressure that comes from having 5 best-selling books, right, at one point or another on Amazon or however that is, but highly rated books, even if we don't even use the best-selling term, right? My audience expects something of value now. So if I can't deliver that, then that's how I make my decisions now. And so I'm on this average of my first book published in 2019. I have 6 books. It's 2025. So I've got this average. I can't do the math right now. That's almost a book a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got another one coming out, but it has nothing to do with notary business. And I'm sitting, I'm poised. I feel ready for that next idea to drop in the shower when I'm driving, because all my ideas come in the shower while I'm driving, but I'm not forcing it. I keep getting all these little ideas, but if I can't deliver the value, I'm not going to write it.
This is interesting. I'm going to actually pull my friend Dory Clark into the conversation. She's also a prolific author, and I'm thinking about her in this moment because when she released her last book, The Long Game, she said, this is the book I'm going to be talking about for 5 years. Because prior to that, she had new books coming out, not annually, but with great frequency. And each one required, a ton of promotional effort. I mean, she's incredible. And, being on a couple hundred podcast episodes, just as an example of the kind of outreach and promotion she was doing for each book. But she made a decision to go a little deeper with this last one. And I took that to heart, and I declared 2024 was the year of no books, because I had a book come out in 2023 and in 2021, and there were people who were like, when's the next book coming out? And I was like, no books. Like, it's amazing how you could be like in the middle of publishing the book, literally trying to upload it to KDP, and people will say, when's your next book coming? Yeah. So particularly as you become prolifically known, like you're known as a prolific author, I feel like there's this expectation to keep creating, but you also have this incredible body of work. So I think that there is this tension. Can you speak a little bit to you said, like, I'm not going to write something unless I feel like I have great value to offer. How often do you go back to re-promoting or re-emphasizing your earlier content that maybe for you was a little like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. But for everyone who's new to it, it's still profoundly helpful. But, you're like, oh, right, I forgot. Of course, you all like that one too. How do you sort of get energy for something you've already created as opposed to always being in creation mode?
I am in the middle of this right now. So that's a really great question. And I feel like I probably was in the middle of this 3 years ago and probably 3 years before that. Like, I know we probably never talked about the Enneagram, but I'm a type 7 on the Enneagram. I'm the enthusiast. I get ideas all the time. I don't want to deal with old stuff. I just want fresh and new. I want to keep going. So I'm constantly reining myself in. But right now, I am realizing how valuable that content was. And the other huge realization for anybody who coaches, trains, writes, is that we assume because we wrote something or created something and someone bought it, liked it, commented on it, maybe even reviewed it, that they actually read it. And I'm learning that's not actually true. So I don't want to say recycling because it's not, but putting that content, that quality content back up just to remind people is of extreme value because we all forget stuff. I'm a course collector. I'm obviously a book collector. I've got tons of books. I need the refresher. So I've developed now, just even going into this year, a strategy that re-highlights each of my books and the content from the books and the strategies from the books, and leveraging a LinkedIn newsletter to help me do that.
Ooh, tell us more about that, because I think a lot of us, A, struggle with what to include in our LinkedIn newsletter, and B, are sitting on a treasure trove of former content, whether that's published books or blog posts or scraps of notebooks, who knows? But there's stuff that we have gotten out of our head. How are you systematically bringing that back to the forefront?
Okay, so this is kind of a multi-phase system, but I have been resisting because, Sandra Long, she's part of your program as well, and she's a co-author of my Supercharge Your Notary Business with LinkedIn. She's been advocating for a LinkedIn newsletter for years, and I'm resisting it because I'm like, I don't want to create new content. I got a blog, I got emails, I got all this stuff. And finally, I actually went to a conference about the power of newsletters. And I'm like, this is so stupid to ignore this, especially LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will email your newsletter to your subscribers on your behalf and promote it when it starts getting traction. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. So I started a weekly, because I can commit to a weekly newsletter. Super simple. I added one day that is just about book promotion. So I go out on Wednesday with my regular notary business tips. And then on Sunday, I do release a special edition that's just about one of my books or a concept from one of my books that promotes it. And that's how I do that. That's it.
It sounds so simple, but it's also tedious, I imagine, going back out and pulling that content. Are you using AI to help you pull those tidbits out? I know AI was not part of your writing process. A lot of your books came out before AI was even a thing. But are you using any tools or resources to help you find those nuggets to repurpose?
No, I'm a little old school, and even though I was a heavy AI resistor at first, I quickly adapt, and I do use AI across my business, but not for this. I usually want to link something to a current event, because what I have found is current event stuff on LinkedIn gets more traction. So I am just looking to connect dots. Oh, we talked about this in this book. How can I tell a story that connects it to this? And that's how I do it.
I love that. I'm now forgetting the name of the person who came up with this term, newsjacking.
Oh, yes.
And if I could find the name of them very quickly, I cannot. But newsjacking is this like idea of like hooking on to something that is happening out in the world. And the person who sort of coined it, I remember seeing them present to the National Speakers Association. So I want to give a shout out. If I can find the name, I'll put it in the show notes for you. But yes, I think it's important to pay attention to like, how do you take the content you've already been creating and then, latch it onto something that is happening in everyday life that people are already thinking about, because then it'll have more relevancy. So that's a really smart way to think about how do you go through existing content to find those little pearls of wisdom that you want to, brush off or polish up a little bit, maybe is a better term, and then put it back out there again. Speaking of AI, before we hit record, you mentioned something to me that I hadn't heard before about how you're countering the use of AI for creating books. Well, tell me a little bit about your approach to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I'm not opposed to AI anymore. I've really embraced it. I think it's a powerful tool. And I think, and we're already seeing some of the legal battles and the creation battles, and there's, where people are picking their sides on this. What I think is going to evolve from this, because there's no stopping artificial intelligence. It's here, it's coming, it's going to get bigger and bigger. But I think we're going to go kind of full circle again. And the human connection, the human element
Mm-hmm.
is going to become more valuable. Like I know a lot of creators are fearful, and I think it's rightfully so to feel fearful, but I think the audience, the consumer of art, the people who appreciate it are going to start placing a higher value on human generated content. So in my last book, Your Passport to Apostates, I wrote with Judy Lawrence. I added it to the copyright page. I said, 100% human generated content. We did not use AI to create our tips for that book. We did that. So, and I think that's going to be of more value. It's going to be more important to people as we move forward. So I'm going to start including that in all of my books.
That's really interesting. I love the idea of sort of naming the process, claiming the humanity piece of it. You also just mentioned now twice that you have had co-authors. Can you speak a little bit to your experience of deciding to do that, and whether you would like give tips for other people who are deciding to do that? Like, how do you make a decision? It seems like a big role to like take on. I'm like,
It
how do I
is,
say this politely, Bill?
it is huge. And I will tell you that I have had 4 co-author relationships that were phenomenal. I have been so blessed and so lucky with my choices. That being said, I can tell how this might tear relationships apart because there is a lot of, I've never been married, so I can't compare it even to a marriage, but there's so much give and take where you want this, they want that. And if the ego gets in the way, it could really mess things up. So my best piece of advice is to choose wisely who you're going to write a book with. And I would spell it out what the expectations are, and then give lots of room for the process of writing a book. It is not black and white. Like I see these people posting, write your business book in 3 days and a 3-day weekend. And I'm like, how is that even possible? Because a book takes on a life of its own. It kind of tells you what it's going to become, or at least it does for me, right? That's part of my process. So sometimes it just goes and you're like, this is where the book's going. We have to go this way. So you got to leave some flexibility for that. The other thing is the money. You've got to be crystal clear. Somebody has to be responsible for the royalties and the collection and payment. And you have to know that Amazon pays 90 days in arrears, and you've got to have those expectations. So people aren't expecting a check on day one. It's not coming for 120 days or so, right?
Yeah, there's an added complexity when there's 2 separate businesses involved in the writing of the book, not just 2 separate authors, but each of them do have their own perspective, and their financial interests need to be aligned as well. But it sounds like it's a worthwhile endeavor if you can find the right match, because just to bring up Sandra Long again, here's somebody who has great expertise in the world of LinkedIn. You have this great expertise in the world of notaries. And by bringing the 2 of you together, you get the best of both worlds. You get a supercharged book, sorry to the pun, that is aimed specifically to the notary community around this really helpful professional tool that they're probably underutilizing and don't know what more they could be doing to help themselves. So I think finding those kinds of matches is really great. And I think people should probably write their first book. My recommendation is get your first book done on your own. What do you think, Bill?
I totally agree with you. I think it's important. I mean, it could go either way, but I think it's important that your voice be found first. So you establish your place, your confidence in that, but also give space too, because some people are so disinterested or fearful of writing, but they've got this expertise. And this is what I find with a lot of business owners. I'm sure you have too, Robbie, right? They're brilliant. I mean, what they do is amazing, but they've got this wall up about writing, and sometimes matching up with the perfect person who can draw that out. And that's one, I will say, I have a ability I don't know if it's a gift, but it's an ability to help extract that expertise around people I have a relationship with. Right? These aren't cold people. I know Sandra. I love Sandra. She's changed the notary world with me. I know Laura Buer. I know Judy Lawrence. I know Bobby Illing, right? So I know what's in there, and I know how to make the dials come out so I can help write that book. And if you find somebody like that, a good pair, it's fine to start a book that way. But if you had a choice, I would write your own book first. And it's easier than ever these days.
I do find that sometimes people write book 2 first. They write this book, and then they realize the book they really need to come out with first is like a more foundational book. Like they came out with like a loftier idea, but because they've evolved past their fundamentals. But having the fundamentals book out there is really helpful too. So I just think we're trying to give you lots of ideas, folks who are listening, around how to get out of your own way, basically. But now I want to switch the conversation a little bit, Bill, to marketing, because you excel also in this arena. Because as a business person, even all the attempts that you made at having businesses before, you learned about marketing through every single one of those. You've tried it all, sometimes multiple times, and it works or it doesn't work. So what have been some of your best ideas for selling units of books? And by that, I mean, I don't always focus on individual units. I'm like, oh, we have to sell, individual books. It's often about selling bulk orders of books is the best way. But some authors are really good at selling volumes of books every single month. And you seem to me the kind of author who's actually seeing royalty checks that are worth talking about. So how is that continuously happening in your business?
Okay, great question. Couple of things. First, before we move into marketing, to button up our previous conversation and how you brought that to a close too, I'll just add real quick that nothing else matters until you write the book. So all this marketing stuff, all of the cover design stuff, all the publishing stuff, don't sweat it. If you're in step 1 of just figuring things out, just write the book. Mm-hmm. Nothing else matters. I can't tell you how many people I talk to that ask about the marketing and the publishing and how the royalties are and what they're going to do and who can sell the book for them in bookstores, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then I'm like, all right, so where's your manuscript? And they don't have a manuscript. None of this stuff matters until you write the book. First draft. So that said, one of the biggest or best decisions I made was partnering with a huge national organization in my industry that agreed to buy copies of my book in huge numbers, and then sell them to their members. And that was an enormous benefit. But what I remember is they had a specific way they had to receive the books. And if you work with Amazon and KDP Publishing, it's random. If you order 999 books, which is the maximum they'll let you order at one time in one order, there might be one book in one order. There might be 23 in one. There might be 75 in another. So you get these random orders. So they wouldn't take that. So I'd have them all shipped to my house. I had to unbox them, rebox them and count them, and put them in a rental van and drive them from Phoenix to Los Angeles to do all this. It was still worth it. Trust me, it was way worth it. But you have to say yes to the adventure on those types of things, because that was one of the most lucrative decisions I ever made. The other one, which feels counterintuitive, but I gave my books away. I still give my books away without question. So sometimes that's a sponsorship. So rather than giving a cash sponsorship to an event, I give a certain number of books. And those books, and I hope we get a chance to talk about this, every book I write is a lead magnet to the rest of my business. So giving away a book, which cost me $4, maybe $5, right? when you get the author pricing from KDP and shipping, I always budget $5, can lead to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars down the road. So it's an investment in the future. So I give away books very, very freely. And people love tangible gifts like that at events, dropping that in a swag bag or whatever it might be. And I had one more, but I can't remember what it was, Robbie.
I just want to actually go back to this point you just made about how every book you wrote is a lead magnet to an offer in your business. And I think that is, I want to make sure we underscore this point, because that is what's missing for most of the conversations I have with authors who come to me because their books didn't perform as well as they had thought they would. And now they want to talk about a relaunch. And I'm like, tell me what you did. It's like, oh, well, you didn't really launch the first time. Okay, tell me how the book fits with your business. Like, if I'm reading and I get really excited about it, how do I find you? What's the next thing I can do with you for free or for money? They don't know how to answer that question. They hem and haw. And that disconnect between I have a book and I have a book that builds my business, I think is actually what's harming entrepreneurs who then have predatory people, gaslighting them into believing that they're going to hit publish and the world's going to change and they're going to be rich and famous.
Yes.
But you do have a strategy for each one of your books. And that is actually that's a big part of why your marketing is then successful as well.
Absolutely. And this is really important to remember that the stages of book development, right? So what we talked about earlier, this calling coming up, or just this realization that a book is a good idea. Then you have to write it. That's a hurdle enough. And I thought that was it. I thought if I write the book, I would do it. And then I signed up for a class and realized that that's not actually true. You need a strategy. So once you write the book, you get the final draft, then you've got to put it together. You got to the production of the book, the editing, the formatting, the cover design, all the things that go into the construction of a book. And then there's a launch strategy for that. It's not just hit publish. There's things you can do to set yourself up for success. And it blows my mind, Robbie, and I know you've experienced this too, where I walked people step by step by step, and they get to the launch strategy and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to hit publish. I'm like, whoa. But all of these things are what makes this that comes next easier, because the part that comes next, the marketing.
Every day that ends in Y, forever and ever and evermore.
Forever and ever, right? So the skipping of the launch strategy is so it's devastating to your process and to your hopes and your expectations. So don't skip that. There is a process.
You are still speaking my language. This is my jam. We're now on my dance floor.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You and I can join each other, preaching to the choir about that, loudly, because honestly, I see even entrepreneurs who are lucky enough to get picked up by traditional publishers miss this step because they think they got it made in the shade. But publishers, their job is to publish. That is their job. It's in their name. They publish your book. And many have some kind of marketing strategy, often either in-house or they refer you to a PR company. But that's not launch. That's a marketing plan. The launch is how are you going to engage your own network to help you boost this book and get visibility and get revenue opportunities and marketing opportunities. Because I just think hoping that it's going to be externally done, and it's kind of it's wishful thinking. It's also kind of a lazy approach to all of this. And if you truly believe you've created something of value, how would you want to keep it from the people you know? It just seems so counterintuitive. But I think it's because I keep making the analogy that we think of writing a book as a marathon, but a marathon runner gets to stop when they're done, when they reach the finish line. This is actually a triathlon. The writing is actually the swim. And then you're soaking wet and you're walking over to a bike. And that's when we get into the launch process. And then you finish that bike ride, and then you start running a marathon. And that is the marketing. I think that we just have a visual of this being a one phase process when it is actual multiple phases. What is, Bill, your worst marketing effort? You're really good at naming failure. So what have you tried that was like a complete waste of your time? Please don't bother.
Marketing to bookstores. So I knew coming into it that my notary books probably would not make it in the bookstore. It's too niche, right? If it did, it would be one copy in the business section that nobody would ever find or read, right? But when I published my essays in Dandelions, I thought, this is perfect. This is bookstore material. People are going to be in there. They're going to sit in cozy chairs, sip coffee, and read Dandelions. I know it. So I looked into how to do that. And you'll get weird advice online. Oh, all you have to do is sign up for KDP Expanded Edition or Ingram Sparks, and then you'll be in bookstores. It does not work that way. That gives them access to your book, but it's all built on relationships. You have to go in, introduce yourself to these store managers, pitch your book. This is why I think my book deserves space on your shelf. And for independent stores in particular, this is a tough sell. They're usually small. They have very limited shelf space. They have high rent. They have to move books to survive. So pitching them on your little short book of essays is a really tough sell. And then they say yes. So I've had, is it 2 or 3 that said yes? One I had to pay. It was less than $100 for 3 months of promotion and space on their shelf. And I was like, I'm going to do that. One, my local one here in Anacortes, Watermark Books, amazing, huge support. They brought me in. They did author events, everything. It was really great. Not a huge seller. I think I gave them 9 books. I refilled once, and we're talking 10 books, maybe 11 books over 2 years, or I guess it's only been a year of promotion. So I would have to go and refill these books. So I got to thinking, I was going to go all up and down the coastline. I was like, I'm going to be the Pacific Northwest short essay writer, right? This is going to be my home turf. But it doesn't make sense. I'd have to buy the books from KDP, put them on the shelf for, what do you call it, when you only get paid when they sell?
Consignment.
Consignment, thank you. The bookstore, they don't buy the books from me, so it's on consignment. And then I'd have to drive down when they need refills. And I was like, wow, this is just not going to work. I loved it. I love being in a bookstore. I have great pictures. Looks great on social media. But
I mean, you could have just walked in with a copy of your book, sat down in a corner, and had someone take a photo.
Oh my gosh.
You know, like, I mean, I do think that there's this ego involved. And I want to correct one thing. Expanded distribution on KDP, when you upload on KDP, folks, if you check off expanded distribution and you plan to upload your file to Ingram Spark, you are going to run into a problem, because expanded distribution basically gets you into libraries on KDP. Bookstores will not buy from KDP. I wonder why, Amazon. So you have to make your book available on Ingram Spark if you want bookstores to buy from you directly. And the libraries will also buy from Ingram Spark. They'll find you on record there as well. So do not check off the expanded distribution box when you go to upload on KDP, and then just do that part through Ingram Spark. And Draft Digital is a great resource for getting your Kindle version or your ebook version out further into the world. So just that. But I do think that there's this huge ego. I'm not going to name names, but I have a friend who's an author who lives on the West Coast and made a deal with the Barnes & Noble on Fifth Avenue. They have a window. And if you buy X thousand of books, maybe it is 1,000, some large number, I think it was 1,000 books, at some rate that is more than what he would have paid for author copies from his publisher, but a better deal than if he actually bought them retail, that they would give him a display for like a week or something like that in this window. So he made this video, talking about social media, of him walking up to the street. There was scaffolding in front of the building.
Shoot.
um,
Wow, poor timing.
Yeah. So I did talk to him, and it was sort of a worthwhile endeavor because he was planning to move those 1,000 books anyway that he had to purchase. That like it was sort of a sunk cost worth it to him because he was going to resell those through bulk orders of speaking. So he wasn't stuck with 1,000 books in his garage, right? He wasn't stuck with that. And he knew he would get this like, social media bump, and he thought it would maybe get the attract the attention of some other big opportunities. Unfortunately, the timing with the scaffolding really made that dismal. But it's just to say, like, I think a lot of us, make a lot of effort. People are paying to get in bookstores and airports. It's a huge amount of money sunk to do that. And for some books and some authors, totally worth it. For most of the people that I'm working with, no. Save your 20 grand or 20 grand a month or whatever the fee might be. And there's so many smarter ways. I'm just so glad we got to dive into some of this with you, Bill. As we part ways, I just wanted to ask how people can find you and follow your work, so I can put all the links in the show notes so that they can track you down.
Yeah, thank you so much. You can find me at notarycoach.com or billsoroka.com.
I love it. And I'm also putting a link to all 6 of your books in the show notes at bizbookpubhub.com. Bill, you have been just phenomenal. I suggest people also find you on LinkedIn so they can join your LinkedIn newsletter and learn about all these great tips that you're sharing so we can figure out how to apply those same ideas to the books that we've written. So I'm going to be keen to be paying attention more closely to that as well. Folks, at bizbookpubhub.com, you'll find all the show notes for all these episodes we've had, plus invitation to attend a free virtual networking event for writers and authors, and a separate event held for speakers. These are events that I host monthly to create opportunities for community building amongst writers, authors, and speakers. You can also get to know our hub partners. These are experts helping entrepreneurs become successful authors so they can use their books as leverage to grow their business. Check all those details out at bizbookpubhub.com. Bill, once again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Love being here. See ya.